You cried for that person, alone, not understanding why it hurt so much, blaming yourself for not being able to forget. That person treated you like you were being dramatic, as if loving too much was somehow your fault, as if showing your feelings was a reason for shame. And you accepted it, swallowed your pride, diminished yourself just to maintain a bit of presence. Even so, you lost. You lost control. You lost nights. You lost your own voice. Today you don't lose anymore. Today you choose. You don't chase after them anymore. You don't wait. You don't ask. You don't beg. You stopped insisting on being seen by someone who only wanted to use you as a crutch. You stopped trying to be enough for someone who never knew how to recognize the obvious. That person noticed. They noticed that you don't respond the same way anymore, that your silence has changed tone, that your absence has become a presence within yourself. Now that person feels it. They miss you, not because you were weak, but because you were whole. That person feels the weight of no longer being necessary because now you are enough for yourself. You haven't become someone else. You've returned to being you, and that person watches, unable to do anything, trying to understand when they lost everything, not realizing it was the moment you recognized your own worth. You cried for that person. Yes, you cried, without anyone seeing, without knowing how to explain. It hurt in a place that has no name, and no one understood how much. You remembered everything, the touch, the tone, the promises, the way that person made it seem like the world was safe, and then they disappeared, left you in pieces, and came back as if nothing had happened. You blamed yourself for accepting it, but you accepted it nonetheless because loving too much was the only thing you knew how to do. That person didn't reciprocate. And still you insisted, because the fear of losing seemed greater than the pain of erasing yourself. You remembered every little gesture, every message you waited for that never came, from every explanation that was never given, from every excuse you made to justify what never made sense. This person made you feel exaggerated, as if feeling was your own problem, as if intensity was a flaw. But you weren't intense, you were honest, you just wanted reciprocity. And now, look where you are. You don't explain yourself anymore. You don't try to convince anyone of your worth. You don't insist. You don't wait. You don't cling. You realized that those who truly love you don't need you to prove anything. You realized that love isn't a competition. It isn't control. It isn't forced silence. You realized that this person never valued you because they always knew you would be there, no matter how much they hurt you. And it was at that point, that almost imperceptible moment, that everything changed. You still remembered, but now, without pain, without longing, without the desire to go back. This person noticed. They noticed in your lightness, in your lack of response, in the way you started smiling without warning. This person realized they lost something they thought they'd have forever, your open heart. This person feels but doesn't speak. They watch. They stay silent. They observe your social media, your movements, your silences, and they try to understand when everything changed. And you know, it changed when you realized it wasn't love. It was attachment. It was fear. It was emotional addiction disguised as connection. This person confused you, manipulated you, made you feel small to keep control. But now they don't have that anymore. They don't command, they don't influence, they don't decide. You don't consult this person before making choices anymore. You don't weigh what you can say. You don't fear being yourself. And this freedom, this peace of yours, hurts more than their absence. Because what this person fears the most is you realizing you never needed them. You realized that everything you were looking for in someone else was always right there inside you. You cried. Today, you smile. And you smile genuinely. This person doesn't understand, but you understand. You know the price you paid. You know how many times you tried. You know how many times you stayed quiet to avoid losing. How many times you let go of yourself to fit into the space that this person offered you. And now you no longer fit. You overflowed with self-awareness, with courage, with presence. And that person is still there with the same lines, with the same game, hoping you'll go back to being the one who bent over backward. But you won't go back, not because you're angry, but because you love. You love yourself. You don't need to prove anything, not even that you've moved on. Your absence speaks for you. Your energy says it all. That person feels it, but can't reach you anymore, because the space you opened within yourself is no longer available. Now it's occupied by you, by your strength, by your wholeness. You are no longer an option. You became a memory, and after the memory, you became a lesson. That person notices, and notices too late, not because they didn't have chances, but because they ignored every single one of them. You expressed with your eyes what your mouth could no longer scream. You showed it even in silence, in the details, in the warnings that were never heard. That person confused care with submission, confused commitment with desperation, confused love with weakness, and now all that person does is try to decipher, what have you become? Who have you become? Why do you seem so well-suited without them? Because that person always thought you would never leave, that just disappearing for a bit and then coming back would make everything fit together again. But it doesn't fit anymore. There's no more space. There's no more of the same strength. That person feels the change but doesn't understand the depth of it, because it wasn't just a new haircut. It wasn't just a new routine, new friends, new habits. It was an internal shift. It was you choosing yourself. It was you looking in the mirror and saying, it's over. Not the love, the illusion is over. The hope of being seen by someone who chose to ignore you is over. The effort to sustain something that only existed on one side is over. The attempt to explain what should already be obvious has come to an end. This person realizes it, but doesn't acknowledge it, because acknowledging it would hurt more than losing you. Losing you was a calculated risk, but realizing that they lost you into yourself is unbearable. And that's what this person doesn't confess to anyone. But you feel it. You see it in the gaze they avoid meeting with yours, in the poorly worded hints, in the read messages left unanswered, in the forced absence, in the pride disguised as indifference. You perceive it, because now you see everything you once denied. You see clearly. You see where you were manipulated. You see how you were shaped to fit a mold that never had space for your truth. You see that you got lost, but you got lost to find yourself. And today you accept nothing less. You don't apologize for being whole. You don't diminish yourself to fit in. This person misses something they helped to destroy, and they can't go back, because there's no longer any space. What existed between you didn't die. It was buried in silence, watered with the tears you hid, and it blossomed within you. Now, this person watches from afar, in silence, like someone who recognizes but no longer knows how to name it, because you've become what they never expected, someone who no longer needs approval, someone who doesn't offer themselves up, someone who knows their own worth. And when you know your worth, you no longer settle for the bare minimum. You didn't turn to stone. You became awareness. You didn't close yourself off. You healed. This person still thinks you're holding on to something, and you are, but not for them, for yourself. You guard your energy. You guard your peace. You guard your heart like someone who has learned not to waste it, and there's no going back. You don't unlearn that. You went to the bottom of the well, alone, and you came out of there, without needing anyone to pull you up. Now you are ground for yourself. You are foundation, you are presence, you are truth, and this person no longer has access to that, because they didn't know how to maintain it when they had it. And it's not due to blocking, distance, or pride. It's due to a lack of harmony. What this person offered doesn't feed you anymore. It was an unstable presence. It was intermittent attention. It was an empty touch. It was a promise that died before being fulfilled. Today you want truth, but not the truth that's spoken, the truth that's felt, the one that's perceived without needing to be said. And that person never knew how to give you that, because they never even knew how to give themselves to themselves. You realize this now. You see that this person didn't know how to love. They knew how to possess. They knew how to hold on. They knew how to manipulate with silence, with doubts, with planned absences. You used to call it lack of time, but it was a choice. It always was a choice. You were the backup plan, while they treated you like a priority. You were emotional depth, while this person was only skimming the surface. And still you poured yourself out. You swam against everything. You drowned in unrequited love, until you resurfaced, not by magic, but out of exhaustion. Because loving is tiring when only one side gives, and now this person looks at you with confusion, as if you've turned into someone else. But you know, you've become yourself again, the version that existed before the pain, before the wear and tear, before the doubt. You recovered in silence, and that screams. It screams in your presence, in your calmness, in your new way of saying no. This person tries to initiate conversations, tries to rehearse comebacks, tries to provoke reactions, but you no longer respond in haste. You don't respond with hope. When you do respond, it's with clarity. When you don't respond, it's with peace. And that destabilizes someone who thought they would have you forever. This person realizes that you are no longer accessible, and that disturbs them more than losing you. Because before, you were there, even if wounded. Today, you are no longer there, and that hurts. Because your absence now has presence. Your absence now has value. Your absence now has impact. You no longer shout, but your energy speaks volumes. This person feels they've lost something sacred, and they can't tell anyone, because those who watched you begging for love now see you loving yourself, and it's impossible to pretend that nothing has changed. This person feels the void, but they don't know how to fill it. But because what used to occupy that space was you, with your dedication, your truth, your intensity, and now you're in a different place, within yourself, whole, grounded. This person doesn't understand how you managed it, but you know, you managed it because you chose to rise. You managed it because the bottom of the pit pushed you inward. You managed it because, after breaking so much, you got tired of being shattered. Now you are structure, you are choice, you are healing. This person notices, but there's no longer a place for them to fit in, because now, everything about you is boundary. It's clarity, it's a truth that won't be bent. You don't speak louder, but your presence screams. And it shouts what this person has always pretended not to hear. You no longer belong to me. And it's not because you built a shield, it's because you stopped being a home for someone who only knew how to devastate. Before, this person would come and go as they pleased. Now they don't even try anymore, because they realize that the path that led to you has been erased over time, with the pain, with the understanding that insisting was self-abandonment. You no longer hold space for a return, not because you feel nothing, but because you feel too much to accept again what extinguished you. This person feels it, and each attempt to get closer is fraught with hesitation, with fear of hearing what you no longer need to say. Because today you don't beg, you don't explain, you don't correct versions, you simply live. And living has been your cry for freedom. Every step you take hurts those who didn't believe you could walk without support. And you walk, firm, alone, present. You don't avoid memories, but you also don't feed on them. You don't wish harm, but you also don't wish for a return. This person now deals with what you faced in silence, with absence, with doubt, with the echo of questions that nobody answers. And all you ever wanted once was this: to be understood, to be valued, to be seen. But that person didn't know, because they confused constancy with need and mistook their love and for a necessity. It never was. It never has been. You were whole. You loved with all that you had, and you hoped it was mutual. But when you realized you were waiting for someone who only knew how to take, something in you broke. That was the day you stopped trying and began to return, not to that person, but to yourself. That person tries to act as if nothing had happened, as if they could reappear with any message. An emoji, a hey, long time no see, a sudden memory. But time doesn't go back. What returns is regret, and regret doesn't rebuild what was broken by absence. You don't go back, not out of hurt, but out of awareness. Because now even your silence has discernment. You no longer respond on impulse. You don't feel on autopilot. You don't give yourself away to emptiness. That person had you in abundance and lost you in scarcity. They lost you when they thought you would never leave, when they underestimated your strength, when they treated your love as something too available. And now, they feel everything you felt, but without the same capacity to rebuild. Because that person never learned to be alone. And you did. You learned in the dark, in pain, in doubt, in solitude, in lack of reciprocation. And that's why you are where you are. And that person, where they are. You crossed the desert without breadcrumbs. And today you nourish yourself with your own presence. That person notices but can no longer reach you. That person sees, but now it's too late. You didn't leave doors ajar, you didn't leave gaps, you didn't leave openings, because when you decided to leave, it wasn't to escape, it was to reconnect with yourself. And what they thought was weakness was just you trying until the end to believe in love. You weren't needy, you were intense, you were real. You were whole, and that scared those who only knew how to deal with halves. Today you are a presence that stands on its own. You are a silence that commands respect. It's a silence that weighs more than 1,000 words. This person understands, and you don't need to say anything, because the answer is you now. If this resonated with you, give it a like so I know this message reached you. Comment below. What did this person teach you without realizing it? Subscribe to the channel to keep receiving messages like this, always eye to eye, with no pretense. And share this video with someone who needs to be reminded of their own worth. This conversation isn't over yet. I'll see you in the next video.